Howdy, y'all! Welcome to this very special bonus episode in honor of Transgender Week of Awareness and Transgender Day of Remembrance. In this episode, I sit down with Alex Vance, the author and illustrator of upcoming children's book, My Wings Are Wrong. My Wings Are Wrong follows the main character, Ben the Moth, in his journey to realizing that even though he looks like a moth, he doesn't feel like one inside. My Wings Are Wrong aims to educate children and parents alike about the experiences that transgender youth go through when just trying to express themselves. Alex speaks on his own experience growing up transgender in West Virginia, how the project of My Wings Are Wrong came to life, his first ever Pride experience, his love for the tight-knit artistic community that comes along with Appalachia, and so much more. I hope y'all enjoy this bonus episode. Lord willing and the creek don't rise. We'll see you again next week.
Yeah, of course.
Cool. Well, I would love to just start off with how you found out about the show. Who are you? How did this connection happen?
Yeah, so we have a lot of mutual followers on Instagram. I don't even know how they found you, but I was kind of just going through my followers or the people I was following and who they were following to try and see who I could reach out to. Because this project, we're kind of like a little small community. We're really working together to try and find an audience. And I followed you for a while, like a month or so, and then you posted the call to see just who would go on your show. So I had to reach out.
Yay! I'm so glad that you did. So what were you reaching out to people about? Tell us a little bit about who you are and the project that you're working on. And
yeah, so I'm working with New Media Advocacy Project, which is a New York-based nonprofit that has a program called Rights Reframed, which works with communities. Right now, they're working with Appalachia to help artists spread information that they think deserves to be spread to their community. So I'm writing a children's book about trans youth in Appalachia. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is so awesome. Okay, so we have to back up then. Tell us a little bit more about who you are and where you're based out of and the identities that you hold as you're coming into this project.
Yeah, so I'm in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. I go to school in Huntington, West Virginia, which is more southern. It's a smaller city, so it's a bigger city than where I am right now. I live on a mountain, eastern panhandle. It's a little bit in the middle of nowhere, but we also have Harper's Ferry and Charlestown in the same area, which are great historical locations. But I found out about the project at school. I go to Marshall University in Huntington, go Herd. And the art program, I'm a graphic design major, they sent out an email about Appalachia Reframed. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll apply to this just to see. And then I got in, so.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. That's so cool.
You.
And so are you from West Virginia to start with?
Yep. I've always lived here. I've lived in the same county my whole life. That's why I decided to go to Huntington for college. It's 6 hours away, but it's the same state, so it works out.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that the closest college that had the kind of program that you were looking for?
No, there's a good amount of schools in West Virginia that have graphic design programs. It's just they're a lot smaller than what I wanted to go to. So my options were really WVU or Marshall, and WVU is just huge. So I chose Marshall.
Totally understand. So I am based out of Western North Carolina, and a lot of people associate it with Asheville, but there's 7 counties west of Asheville that are much more rural and get completely forgotten because they're kind of squished in between Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. And so Western Carolina University is actually in the hometown that I grew up in, but it's a very small public college. But I ended up going there, have always lived out here. And so very similar. So I totally understand that. That's so cool. So what was it like growing up in West Virginia as the human that you are?
growing up, I had great experiences in nature. It's beautiful here. I think I came out in middle school. So I don't think I came out in middle school. I did come out in middle school. But it was scary. I mean, I'm in what used to be one of the most blue counties in West Virginia. And it was still terrifying. Um, I came out unintentionally with two of my absolute best friends now. And train of thought. It it was scary. I came out in school, so that was the first like place I came out. I came out to my friends before I came out to my family. Um, and there was definitely pushback between students and administrators. I had a few awful experiences, lots of good ones. Um, but it was definitely a nerve-wracking sort of who's going to accept me, who's not, what steps do I go from here? How do I continue to be myself while staying safe and avoiding as much trouble as possible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that must have been just like what a clash of emotions, like so many
Yeah.
different emotions and needs. And I had multiple friends here who did not come out until close to the end of high school or even like in college, just because like whether it was spoken or unspoken, there was not safety enough for them in like the community for them to feel able
Yeah.
to even come to that type of evolution, maybe even to recognize it for themselves, much less like come out to others. And so just like what bravery, and also so much goes into that. Like kudos to you holding space for you. And it sounds like you had some like pretty close friends that who were in that experience on the
Yeah.
front lines with you that might have their safety and solidarity. So that might have created a little bit of
Absolutely.
safety. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely, I was the only transgender person I knew until high school, when my high school got bigger than my middle school. And to go through some of the experiences that I did as a child, like when you're in that situation and you come out at 12, you think, oh, I'm so grown up. I can deal with this. I've been given this by some omnipotent, whatever you believe in. Um, and now I should be strong enough to deal with this by myself because I'm an adult, you know? Um, and then once you hit 18, which is where I'm at right now, I'm still a child, it feels like, but
Mm.
once you hit 18, you're like, dude, you were a kid. Like you shouldn't have had to deal with that. Like a literal child. And then that's what gets me so upset about the recent news about trans laws in Florida and Texas. I'm like, these are literal children. And it sucks. It's just, I don't know. It's wild to me.
Yeah. It's so freaking beautiful or sorry, brutal. And I was just about to say, because Appalachia's got such this like beautiful sense of community, but then there's also just like this horrendous, like just cognitive dissonance, like in the way that like they show up for each other. And there is like some sense of safety, but then there's also just like this, like there's all of these pockets of like trauma that just gets like projected in all of the wrong directions and just ends up re-traumatizing like literal children. And
Yeah.
like, and it's so unnecessary. And I'm curious, are there explicit stories that like you feel comfortable sharing?
So my first Pride, it was in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, which is a pretty small, but it has Shepherd's University. So it's like a little college town, but it's definitely like a small liberal arts kind of college town, which is great for Pride. And so it was a super family friendly event. Me and my two best friends went. We were 12, 13 ish. We had one of my friend's parents there with us. And it was definitely strange to see how many people in our area are openly gay and or allies. And it was super affirming that like after all that we had been through the year of coming out, it was like, wait, but people are still on our side besides like our immediate friends and family. Um, it was definitely like a whole group of walks of life there. Like we saw older people. We watched. I don't know if this should be included, and you can make the choice on that. But we watched right as we pulled up. We sat in the car and we looked into the car next to us, and we saw this old man, probably 60s, 70s, screwing in a nipple ring right next to us.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was our first introduction to Pride. It was hilarious. It stuck with me until now. But that just kind of it's a great group of people and it's amazing. I love it. I loved it. It's a very important part of my timeline, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So that I love that there was like that opportunity for you at such a young age too, like 5 or 6 years ago, it sounds like. And my hometown in Silva, North Carolina. So they just had their first Pride last year. So like we are still like, yeah, it's really great, but like we're definitely still catching up, I think, in a lot of ways. And yeah, so I love that that was part of your journey growing up. I had a friend whose mom took me to a drag show when we were in like middle school. And I definitely think that was part of my like, it was a family friendly drag show. I will say it was like on a college campus. But it was, I think that was definitely part of my like, like I am not as weird and like the people around me are not as weird as we've always thought that we were. And so it was just so absolutely affirming.
Yeah.
I love that. So graphic design, why graphic design?
Yeah. So I've always been artistic, like since I could hold a pencil. And I knew in high school that I wanted to go into the arts, but I also knew that I wanted to be financially stable. So it was kind of a choice of what art major can I do that I'll enjoy and that can get me a stable job outside of college. And I started designing like t-shirts for clubs I was in and logos for friends. And I was like, this is just graphic design, but I'm doing it on my own. Let me go get taught how to do it correctly. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, very cool. And I guess with that, like considering how like honestly traumatic even it was like in some of your experiences as a child, like coming out and being a part of this community, what was it that called you to want to stay in your state to study graphic design?
Honestly, it was the tuition. It's so much cheaper in West Virginia. But now that I've finished a year at Marshall, I don't want to transfer. It's you think as an artist that when you go to college, you have to go to college in New York or Pittsburgh or Georgia, like SCAD, like all the big art schools. That's how you're going to be successful. But it's not. It's not. Appalachia is such a tight knit artistic community. It's insane. I never had thought about that before I went to college, but now I'm working with NMAP, and it's just I've had so many opportunities. Like I can just literally reach out to someone and ask, hey, do you want to do this with me? And they'll be like, yeah, okay. And I'm like, what? That's how this works. You just have to ask for things and it works out. I feel like everyone is so welcoming. It's an amazing place to be an artist.
Yeah, I love that you've like come to discover that. And honestly, like arts have been such an important part of Appalachian like culture and history over time. And our art in the various different forms, like musical art, like visual arts, etc., have all been just born out of this like combination of all of the different ancestries that have informed Appalachia, right? Like even like the African like ancestry, and then like of course like the Scots Irish that folks talk about. But like I had one of my best friends in we like lived together in college, and she's still one of my best friends to this day. She in college was studying, she was a dual major in history and arts, and she ended up focusing hers on ceramic arts. And so for her history, like senior paper, capstone paper, whatever, she ended up writing about like the influence of like African artwork and all the other cultures that went into the face jugs, like that are famous for
Oh yeah.
Appalachian, like those jugs with the faces on them. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I learned so much from that. And just like the combination of like art and Appalachia's, like there's so much more to it than I think people even really think about.
There really is. Yeah.
I love that. So what is like, tell us about this like children's book that you're working on.
Yeah, so My Wings Are Wrong is my children's book. It follows the main character, Ben, who is a moth, and he realizes after coming out of his cocoon that he isn't a moth on the inside. He feels like a butterfly. Spoiler alert, I'm so sorry. But
I won't tell my
it
kid, don't worry.
good. Um, but it's all just kind of a big metaphor for being transgender. That way, that the parent that reads the book gets to decide how they want to talk about this conversation. It's a very serious, like, talk that you should inform your kids about in a way that is best for you and your child. So I've left it pretty open ended. I did include therapy, which I think is a great thing to normalize. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but this way, the parent gets to talk about transgender issues with their child, and gets to teach them the way that they feel is best. Because I'm not a parent, I don't know how I would ever have to bring that up to my child, be like, hey, I'm transgender. I don't know how I'll do that. I want the parents to be able to inform their kids in the way that they feel is best. So it's all a very kid friendly version that is also progressive and kind about the way that it's introduced in the book.
Awesome. Well, even being not a parent, like coming at it from the other angle, as a child, like you
Yeah.
as little Alex, like growing up, what would you have loved to have heard from a children's book and from the people who were raising you that would have felt like reaffirming or validating?
So I actually didn't know about the LGBTQ community at all until I was in fifth grade when I watched Ellen. They introduced, I love this story. I tell this to everyone. They introduced Ellen's wife. So I turned to my mom and I say, Mom, is Ellen a boy? And she goes, No, Ellen's a woman. And I said, Did they mean her husband? She goes, No, it's her wife. I'm like, and then the gears started turning. Um, and so I honestly love all the LGBTQ like children's books that have come out in the last 10 years, maybe. I think that it's amazing that at least kids are given this knowledge and told that, like, hey, people are gay, like it's a thing. Um, I think just presenting that information is so important. Um, so I'm really glad that my book gets to touch on that and hopefully introduce a few people to the other people in the world that aren't exactly like them.
Yeah. It's so important that just, I think kids are exposed to just variety and just
Yeah.
options and creativity. And I think so much of like capitalism in general, like produces just really a lot of propaganda that like indoctrinates us into like the binaries as much as possible, like gender roles, and then even like our role as like members of a working productive society and like whatever that means, and like stifling like creativity. And so as a parent, like there have been so many questions that I've had to ask myself around like, okay, well, how many pieces of this, like, am I going to introduce to my child, right? Like, are we going to use they, them pronouns from like very day one? Like, how are we going to navigate this and do it in a way that's like conscientious of like his right to like have some autonomy, but also like navigating like we still live in rural Appalachia and like have family members that there's a lot of tension, between how we choose to like navigate in the world. And so one of the things that I have found really helpful for me as a parent trying to figure out how to navigate that space is just like having like books for one, like children's books all around, but also like other types of media, and then like friends and community members that are like representative of like all different like just lifestyles and like backgrounds and like perspectives and like children's books, especially. Like I got really lucky. A couple of friends of mine had sent some really good ones, like A is for Activist and like Counting on Community. And then there's like this book that's like How Mothers Love Their Children. And it talks about like some moms are like strippers, but it says it in very like kid-friendly terms, you know, where it's like everybody's like, every child's mother loves them in however they can. And so I just think it's just so important, like you said, like to even just have books that kind of introduce subjects that then children can ask questions about and like start to like create their own understanding of.
Yeah, children are so like questioning of everything. If they have questions about something, they'll ask it. And if we can present information that gets them to ask questions, that gets their little gears turning, I think that's great. I think that they'll learn what they want to learn. Yeah.
So totally right. Like, I don't know if you ever heard this when you were a kid, but I used to get told like curiosity kills the cat, like all the time. Or I would ask why so much. And my grandma would eventually be like, just to make you ask questions. Like, cause I'd be like, well, why this and why that? And she'd be like, well, it's because they wanted you to ask why. And I feel like, I don't know, that's just such a like, I'm sure it gets old as a, like my kid can't quite talk that much yet. So I'm like, I'm sure there's going to come a day where I'll be like, I brew my words, but like, even still, I'm like, if an adult doesn't know the answer, I feel like there's ways to be like, I don't know, like, why don't you go look for some answers and like, let me know what you find, you know, and like letting them kind of explore that curiosity is so important, because it's just like, it also fosters their love for learning too. Right. And like,
absolutely,
always exploring new things. Cool. Well, is there anything in particular that like so I guess I could give some context to you. I know you said you've been following for about a month, but I don't know if you're a podcast listener, if you've had the chance to listen to any of the episodes. We're still pretty new. We just launched mid-June. Nice. And episode, I think 5 dropped yesterday, or 6. I'm trying to remember. And not yesterday, but on Tuesday. And the whole like purpose of the show is like I kind of alternate between like doing either historical or like topical deep dives into specific things, and then like doing interviews with like folks like you and other folks who I've interviewed, like some podcasters and then some like mutual aid organizers and like some just radical folks all up and down the mountain range. And like the whole goal of the show is like really to bust myths that like Appalachia is this like hopeless, conservative, like trumped out region. And I think like so much of our history and our culture has been intentionally whitewashed because of things like the mine wars and the history of like multiracial working class uprising, and like our people being so great at like self-sufficient, like mutual aid networks and like taking care of themselves, you know? And so like the whole goal of the show is like to demonstrate like stories from today, but then also to talk about history that's like reveals like the actual truth and does bust those myths. So like, is there anything in particular that like you would want to share with folks who might not be familiar with Appalachia or might have some like stereotypes or assumptions about West Virginia or folks that are from there that like you feel like folks should hear?
Yeah, one of my favorite facts about West Virginia and LGBT people is that West Virginia has the highest per capita amount of transgender youth than the whole rest of the United States.
What? I had no idea.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite facts, honestly. It blows everyone's mind because it's like, why are we all here? And scientists don't know. We don't know why we've all gotten here. But it's our community in Appalachia is just so highly individualistic that I think that is just a great reason why we're just living how we're destined to live, without fear of how other people are going to react, as long as we're in a safe location. But it's just you don't think about West Virginia and you're like, oh yeah, all the transgender people are there. No, we're just here, and no one really acknowledges that. It's not really brought up. It's not mentioned, but we're here. We're queer. We're not going away. Um, it's great. That's one of my favorite facts about West Virginia.
That is so powerful. And I mean, I think there's like two kind of things that makes me think of. One is like that demonstrates like why we can't afford to write off these areas, which is like one of my biggest frustrations is like when people, especially who consider themselves leftists or like liberals, are just like, well, screw the South, screw Appalachia, screw rural communities. It's like, no, like these communities are so much more. And like the people who suffer when we write them off are the transgender youth, are the people of color who live there, are the single moms who are already struggling, right? Like, it's like, that's so privileged to just be like, oh, well, write them off,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then I think, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to agree that like they assume that we're all just the same type of person. They don't actually try and realize who comes here. Like a quick Google search would would show you that there's more than just Republicans that are polluting the environment in Appalachia. There's other people. We're not just one type of person. Yeah.
Exactly. And the Republicans and like mainstream media have just done such a great job at like washing out the like just existence of anyone beyond this stereotype that benefits like their narrative. It's just so gross.
Yeah.
And the other thing that like it made me think of is that well, I think that like as far as like a Appalachian just like historical perspective, like you were saying, like for one, we're individualistic, but also I think like we've always been so ingrained in like we are different out here. And like even from like, history's sake, it's like the folks who were willing to like go out towards the Appalachian Mountains to settle down were like, they were a little bit rough around the edges already, like they weren't quite the same as like all of the folks who were settling near like the major like colonial like hotspots. And like, I think that we've always been forced to like exist kind of outside the bounds of like stereotypical like capitalism. Like, like I think about like, I mean, gender roles obviously exist and like they're real out here, but also like how really they've had to overlap a lot, like for the purpose of survival. Like women out here have been badass, like, like in the field, the same as the men. And like, even like on the front lines of the worker, like rise ups that have happened. And so I think that there's just like a way in which, because we've always kind of been on the fringes, it almost opens the doors for folks to come to the realization that they like are transgender and like identify as that, or that they exist in whatever other ways might be like outside of the box of like capitalism's definitions. And so I think there's like, it's cool how there's a couple of different layers to that I think could make that factoid possible.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you would want to touch on and share with folks? Are there like, well, also I'll ask this too, is like, are there other folks that you feel should be on the show who like represent really strong voices of like LGBTQ advocacy in your area, or like do other cool work that we should like feature the voices of?
Honestly, anyone working in the NMAP Appalachia Reframe program would be great. I was thinking of Bailey Epperly is the first person that came to mind. She's working on creating a magazine called what is it called? It's so good, and I completely Holler Space Magazine. Bailey Epperly is working on Holler Space Magazine that features all of the weird, wonderful Appalachians, lots of LGBT creators, artists. So she absolutely should come on here if she's interested. If you're interested, I'm very excited for her project. So
Yay. I'll definitely reach out and see if we can have her on. And in the meantime, also, when does your children's book drop?
It's coming out in October. It's so soon.
Oh my
Very
gosh.
exciting.
Yes. And where or how will people be able to get their hands on it when it comes out?
So it'll definitely be on my website, which is still being built. So it's not quite done. And then it'll be on my Instagram shop, and I'll be doing some pop-up shops, hopefully closer to the release date. I'll find out. But yeah, I think my website will be the most reliable way.
Cool. And for your Instagram, what's your handle on there? How would people find you?
It's My Wings Are Wrong on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. So all one word, no spaces, capitals, periods, easy peasy.
Coming on the show. I'm so excited about your children's book. I'll definitely be ordering one for my kiddo.
Thank you.
And I think it's just so important to shed light on like the many different identities that those of us in Appalachia hold. And so thank you for bringing your voice to the conversation.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I hope you have a great weekend. And when the show does drop, I'll definitely shoot the link your way so that you can plug it wherever you feel like you want to plug it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alex. Have a great day.
You too.